They called you too sensitive, didn't they? Too emotional, too deep, too much. And somewhere along the way, you started believing them. You began shrinking yourself, dulling your light, apologizing for the very gift that makes you extraordinary. But what if I told you that Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, saw sensitivity not as weakness, but as the hallmark of psychological and spiritual evolution? Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the most sensitive people are often the ones who see what others miss? They're the ones who feel the undercurrents in a room, who know when someone is lying not by their words, but by the energy they carry. They're the ones who cry at movies, who feel physical pain when witnessing injustice, who seem to absorb the emotions of everyone around them like a human sponge. This is not dysfunction. This is not a flaw to be fixed. According to Jung, this is the mark of someone whose psyche has remained open to the deeper layers of human experience. You know that feeling, right? When you walk into a room and immediately sense the tension that no one else seems to notice? When you can feel someone's sadness even when they're smiling? That's not oversensitivity, that's perception operating at a level most people have shut down. Jung understood that sensitivity is the gateway to what he called individuation, the process of becoming whole. The sensitive person hasn't built the thick walls that protect others from feeling too much. They've remained permeable to the collective unconscious, to the archetypal energies that flow through all of humanity. While others have learned to numb themselves, you've remained awake. And awakeness, Jung knew, is both a gift and a burden. Think about it like this. Imagine consciousness as a vast ocean. Most people live on the surface, skimming along the waves, never diving deep. But the sensitive person, they're natural deep-sea explorers. They descend into the mysterious depths where ancient wisdom lives, where the collective memories of humanity pulse like bioluminescent creatures in the dark. This is why you feel so much. You're not just feeling your own emotions, you're tapping into the emotional inheritance of the species. But here's where it gets interesting. Jung believed that the most sensitive individuals often carry what he called the wounded healer archetype. This ancient pattern shows up in mythology across cultures. The person who has been deeply wounded and through their healing journey gains the power to heal others. Your sensitivity isn't random. It's purposeful. It's preparing you for something greater. You know that feeling when someone shares their deepest pain with you, and you don't just hear their words, you feel their anguish in your bones? That's not emotional dysfunction. That's the wounded healer archetype activating. Your nervous system, your psyche, your very soul has been calibrated to receive and transform suffering. But first, you have to transform your own. This is where most sensitive people get stuck. They've been told their whole lives that feeling too much is wrong, so they try to build walls. They try to become normal. But Jung warned against this. He said that when we reject the very qualities that make us unique, we split ourselves in half. We create what he called the shadow, the part of ourselves we're ashamed of and try to hide. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine your sensitivity as a finely tuned radio antenna. While others are receiving only the basic AM stations of human experience, you're picking up FM, shortwave, satellite signals, the full spectrum of human consciousness. But instead of celebrating this extraordinary gift, you've been taught to see it as static, as noise, as something to be turned down or turned off. This is the tragedy of the sensitive person in our culture. We live in a world that values emotional numbness as strength, that mistakes disconnection for independence, that confuses feeling deeply with being weak. But Jung saw through this collective delusion. He understood that the sensitive person isn't broken, they're breaking open. And there's a profound difference. You probably notice that when you're around certain people, you feel drained, heavy, almost sick. That's because your psychic boundaries are naturally more permeable. You're absorbing their unprocessed emotions, their shadow material, their unconscious projections. But here's what Jung would tell you. This isn't happening to you randomly. On some level, you agreed to this. Your soul chose sensitivity as a path to wisdom. Think about the most profound spiritual teachers throughout history. Buddha, who felt the suffering of all beings so deeply that he devoted his life to finding a way to end it. Jesus, who wept over Jerusalem, who felt the pain of humanity so acutely that he was willing to carry it to the cross. These weren't weak men. These were individuals whose sensitivity had been refined into spiritual power. Jung had a term for this transformation. He called it the transcendent function. It's the psychological process by which we integrate our deepest wounds and turn them into our greatest strengths. Your sensitivity, properly understood and channeled, becomes supernatural empathy. Your emotional intensity becomes spiritual fire. Your tendency to feel everything becomes the capacity to heal everything. But let me ask you something else. Have you ever noticed how the people who call you too sensitive are often the ones who seem most disconnected from their own emotions? They're like people who've gone colorblind trying to convince you that rainbows don't exist. They can't see what you see, feel what you feel, so they assume you're making it up or being dramatic. This is classic psychological projection. They've shut down their own sensitivity to survive, and your aliveness reminds them of what they've lost. Your tears make them uncomfortable because they've forgotten how to cry. Your empathy threatens them because they've armored their hearts. Your depth disturbs them because they've learned to live on the surface. Jung understood this dynamic perfectly. He wrote about how the collective often punishes the individual who dares to be different, who refuses to conform to emotional numbness. The sensitive person becomes a scapegoat, carrying the unexpressed emotions of the entire group. They're told they're too much, precisely because they're feeling what everyone else is trying not to feel. This is like watching a garden where all the other flowers have been trimmed down to identical, colorless stems, and you're the one wild rose that refused to be cut. Of course they think you're too much. You're the only one still blooming. But here's where Jung's wisdom becomes transformative. He taught that our greatest weakness, when properly integrated, becomes our greatest strength. The very quality that makes you feel like an outsider, your sensitivity, is actually your superpower. It's your direct connection to the collective unconscious, to the archetypal realm where all healing begins. You know that feeling when you're in nature, maybe walking through a forest or sitting by the ocean, and suddenly you feel this overwhelming sense of connection to everything. That's not just appreciation for beauty. That's your sensitive nervous system picking up on the subtle energies that connect all life. Most people have lost this capacity. They walk through the world like emotional zombies, cut off from the very frequencies that give life meaning. Jung believed that sensitive individuals are the antennae of the human race. They're the ones who pick up the early warning signals, who sense the collective shifts before they become obvious. They're the canaries in the coal mine of human consciousness, feeling the toxicity before it becomes visible to others. This is why sensitive people often feel like they don't belong in this world. They don't belong in a world that has forgotten how to feel. They belong in a world that hasn't been built yet, a world where depth is valued over surface, where feeling is seen as wisdom, where sensitivity is recognized as the evolutionary edge it truly is. Let me tell you about what Jung called the wounded healer path. Every sensitive person walks this path, whether they realize it or not. First comes the wounding, the rejection, the misunderstanding, the constant message that you're too much. This drives you into what Jung called the dark night of the soul, a period of profound isolation and self-doubt. But then, if you're willing to go deeper instead of shutting down, something miraculous happens. You begin to understand that your wounds are not personal failures, they're collective patterns. Your pain is not individual neurosis, it's species-wide unconsciousness. Your sensitivity is not a bug in your programming. It's a feature that's desperately needed in a world that has forgotten how to feel. This realization transforms everything. Suddenly, your sensitivity becomes a form of service. Your ability to feel deeply becomes a gift to a world that has numbed itself to death. Your tears become healing waters for the collective drought of emotion. Your empathy becomes a bridge between the conscious and unconscious minds of humanity. You know that feeling when you're in a group of people and you can sense all the unspoken tensions, all the hidden emotions, all the things everyone is pretending not to feel? That's not a curse. That's a calling. You're being asked to hold space for the collective shadow, to feel what others cannot or will not feel. But here's the crucial part. You're not meant to drown in these feelings. You're meant to transform them. Jung taught that the sensitive person, properly trained, becomes a kind of emotional alchemist. They take the lead of human suffering and, through their own inner work, transform it into the gold of wisdom and compassion. This is why meditation, therapy, journaling, and other forms of inner work are so essential for sensitive people. You're not just healing yourself, you're healing the collective. Every time you process your own emotions instead of numbing them, you're creating more space for feeling in the world. Every time you choose to stay open instead of shutting down, you're helping to heal the collective emotional paralysis. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how people often tell you their deepest secrets, even when you've just met them? How children and animals seem drawn to you? How you can sense when someone is in pain, even when they're trying to hide it? These aren't coincidences. These are signs that you're operating as a wounded healer, as someone whose sensitivity has been refined into a form of spiritual service. Jung wrote about the importance of what he called holding the tension of opposites. This is the ability to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, to empathize without losing yourself, to be sensitive without being fragile. This is the advanced skill that sensitive people are called to develop. Think of it like this. Imagine your sensitivity as a powerful river. When it's uncontrolled, it can flood and destroy everything in its path. But when it's properly channeled, it can generate tremendous power, irrigate vast fields, and bring life to desert places. Your sensitivity is not the problem, the lack of proper channeling is. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes crucial. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, not who others expect you to be. For the sensitive person, this means learning to honor their gift while also developing the skills to work with it effectively. You know that feeling when you're around someone who's genuinely comfortable with their own emotions? They can feel deeply without being dramatic, empathize without being overwhelmed, be present with pain without being consumed by it. They have what Jung called emotional sovereignty. They own their feelings without being owned by them. This is the goal for every sensitive person, not to become less sensitive, but to become more skillful with their sensitivity. It's like learning to play a powerful instrument. The violin isn't too much. It's just waiting for someone who knows how to draw beautiful music from its strings. Jung believed that sensitive individuals are often carrying what he called cultural complexes, the unexpressed emotions and unresolved traumas of their families, communities, and cultures. You might feel sad for no apparent reason, anxious about things that haven't happened, angry about injustices you've never personally experienced. This isn't mental illness, it's psychic inheritance. You're feeling what your ancestors couldn't feel, processing what your family couldn't process, healing what your culture couldn't heal. This is both the burden and the gift of the sensitive person. You're not just living your own life, you're helping to complete the unfinished emotional business of generations. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. This process of feeling and healing the collective pain is not punishment, it's evolution. The sensitive person is participating in the next stage of human development, where we learn to feel collectively, to heal collectively, to evolve collectively. Think about it like this. Imagine humanity as a vast nervous system and sensitive people as the nerve endings. They feel the pain first, but they also feel the pleasure first. They detect the dangers first, but they also sense the possibilities first. They're the early warning system and the early celebration system of human consciousness. This is why Jung saw sensitivity as a form of leadership. Not the kind of leadership that involves commanding others, but the kind that involves feeling deeply enough to show others what's possible. The sensitive person, properly developed, becomes a pioneer of human consciousness. You know that feeling when you're moved to tears by something beautiful, a sunset, a piece of music, an act of kindness? That's not weakness. That's your soul recognizing its home frequency. Most people have lost this capacity. They can look at a sunset and think, pretty, but they can't feel the profound spiritual communication that's actually happening. Your sensitivity is your direct line to the sacred. While others have to work to access transcendent experiences, you live there naturally. The challenge is learning to navigate this realm without being overwhelmed by it. Jung taught that the goal of psychological development is not to become invulnerable, but to become what he called vulnerably strong. This means being able to feel deeply while maintaining your center, to empathize profoundly while preserving your boundaries, to be sensitive while also being resilient. Let me paint you another picture. Imagine your sensitivity as a finely tuned seismograph. It detects the subtle movements in the collective unconscious long before they become obvious to others. The sensitive person often knows when relationships are shifting, when communities are changing, when cultural transformations are beginning, not through logical analysis, but through felt sense. This is why sensitive people often feel like they're living in the future. They're picking up on the emerging patterns before they become manifest. They're feeling the collective dreams and nightmares as they're being born in the unconscious. This can be disorienting, but it's also a profound gift. Jung believed that the sensitive person is often carrying what he called the spirit of the times, the emerging consciousness that wants to be born in the world. Your sensitivity is not just personal, it's transpersonal. You're not just feeling your own emotions, you're feeling the emotions of the future trying to break through. This is why you might feel so out of place in the current world. You're not meant to fit perfectly into what is. You're meant to midwife what wants to become. Your sensitivity is your qualification for this role, not your disqualification. But here's the paradox that Jung understood. The more sensitive you become, the stronger you actually are. Not stronger in the sense of being harder or more defended, but stronger in the sense of being more flexible, more resilient, more capable of handling complexity and ambiguity. You know that feeling when you're in a difficult situation and everyone else is panicking. But you can feel the deeper currents that will eventually resolve the crisis. That's your sensitivity operating as wisdom. You're not just feeling the surface drama, you're feeling the deeper pattern that's trying to emerge. This is what Jung meant when he said that the sensitive person has access to the transcendent function, the ability to find the third way, the creative solution that emerges from holding the tension between opposites. Your sensitivity gives you access to information that pure logic cannot provide. Think about the most profound breakthroughs in human history, in art, science, spirituality, social change. They almost always came through individuals who were sensitive enough to feel what others couldn't feel, to sense the possibilities that others couldn't sense, to imagine the futures that others couldn't imagine. Your sensitivity is not a personal quirk, it's an evolutionary capacity. It's the leading edge of human consciousness, the growing tip of the species' development. Every time you choose to feel rather than numb, to stay open rather than shut down, to trust your sensitivity rather than apologize for it, you're participating in the evolution of human consciousness. But Jung also understood that this path requires tremendous courage. It's much easier to shut down, to build walls, to become normal. The sensitive person is constantly faced with the choice. Do I honor my gift, or do I betray it for acceptance? Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you stopped apologizing for your sensitivity and started celebrating it? What would change if you saw your emotional depth not as a problem to be solved, but as a gift to be cultivated? What would become possible if you understood that your sensitivity is not your weakness, but your superpower? Jung believed that the sensitive person has a sacred responsibility not to fix everyone else, but to model what it looks like to be fully alive in a world that has forgotten how to feel. Your job is not to dim your light to make others comfortable. Your job is to shine so brightly that others remember their own capacity for illumination. This is like being a lighthouse in a storm. You don't save the ships by leaving your post or turning off your light. You save them by standing steady and beaming your guidance into the darkness. Your sensitivity is your lighthouse. It's meant to guide others home to their own emotional truth. You know that feeling when you're around someone who's genuinely at peace with their sensitivity? They're not defensive about it, not apologetic about it, not trying to hide it. They wear their depth like a crown, their empathy like armor, their tears like jewels. They've learned the secret that Jung understood. Sensitivity is not something to be overcome. It's something to be mastered. This mastery doesn't mean becoming less sensitive. It means becoming more skilled at working with your sensitivity. It means learning to feel deeply without drowning, to empathize without merging, to be present with pain without being consumed by it. Jung taught that this kind of mastery comes through what he called active imagination, the practice of consciously working with the images, symbols, and energies that arise from the unconscious. For the sensitive person, this means learning to dialogue with their emotions rather than just experiencing them. Think of it like this. Instead of being a victim of your sensitivity, you become its conscious partner. Instead of being flooded by emotions, you learn to swim in them. Instead of being overwhelmed by empathy, you learn to use it as a tool for healing and connection. This transformation changes everything. Your sensitivity stops being a burden and becomes a superpower. Your emotional depth stops being a liability and becomes an asset. Your empathy stops being a weakness and becomes a strength that the world desperately needs. Jung understood that we're living in a time when the old ways of being human are no longer sufficient. We need new capacities, new ways of perceiving, new forms of intelligence, and the sensitive person, properly developed, embodies these emerging capacities. You know that feeling when you can sense the aliveness in everything, not just people and animals, but plants, places, even objects. That's not imagination. That's your sensitive nervous system picking up on the subtle energies that animate all existence. Most people have lost this capacity, but you've retained it. This is why Jung saw sensitive individuals as bridges between the visible and invisible worlds, between the conscious and unconscious minds, between the personal and transpersonal dimensions of existence. Your sensitivity is your qualification for this role as a bridge builder, a translator between realms. But here's what Jung would want you to understand. This gift comes with great responsibility. You're not meant to use your sensitivity to manipulate others or to gain sympathy. You're not meant to wear your wounds as badges of honor or to use your empathy as a form of control. The mature, sensitive person learns to use their gift in service of something greater than themselves. They become healers, artists, teachers, counselors, visionaries, not because they're trying to save the world, but because they can't help but respond to the call of their own nature. This is the ultimate paradox of sensitivity. The more you embrace it, the stronger you become. The more you honor your depth, the more grounded you become. The more you trust your empathy, the clearer your boundaries become. The more you celebrate your gift, the more others are inspired to discover their own. Jung knew that the sensitive person carries the seeds of the future in their nervous system. They feel the possibilities that want to emerge, the healing that wants to happen, the love that wants to be born. They're not just feeling their own emotions, they're feeling the emotions of the world that's trying to be born. You've always been the one you've been waiting for, not because you're perfect, but because you're perfectly sensitive to what needs to be healed. Your tears are not weakness. They're the water that will nourish the seeds of the new world. Your empathy is not vulnerability. It's the bridge that will connect us all. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's the very quality that will help humanity remember how to feel alive again. Now finally, you see it. You were never too sensitive. The world was simply not sensitive enough. And you, beautiful soul, you are exactly what this world needs to remember how to feel again.